Well, I'll bring it to order at 6:30. And I can see, do we have to do a roll call legally?
Not sure.
I can tell from Zoom that all 5 board members are logged in, and Jennifer Griffin is our guest, and Kevin Davis is logged in, and that's all the people I see. So that's our roll call. Is there any public comment for items not on the? No? All right, then I'm going to go, item 3 is consent item, and I'll move to approve the consent items so we can discuss them. Need a second.
Okay.
All right, 6:33.
I'm sorry, who was it that seconded?
Yeah,
I did.
who?
Nisha.
It was Director Racy. Yeah.
Oh, anyway, any questions about the report, the board meeting minutes, check register, which it looks like I signed 51 checks last month, which is a lot compared to a normal month. But there are there are a lot of refunds for people who were in our programs. You know, they always do deposits, and then you have to refund them checks. So anyway, in the general manager's report. Any questions on those? Well, I noticed that the financial report down the second, in the bottom part of it, I showed some equities has not changed between the 2 fiscal years, basically. Oh, actually, over the course of a month. I'm sorry. Yeah, but for some reason we got zeros in there, and I was asking Kevin about that. And what was your response, Kevin?
This is something that's been coming up once we switch to QBO. I usually take that line out because it doesn't really add any information. It's 0 this month, it'll be 0 next month. It was 0 last month.
Okay. Anyway, fund balance of net operating and capital replacement fund. I would think at least the first 2 in the course of a month, but maybe they don't because they change slowly. At least operating fund balance would change, so.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but it's kind of, your voice is kind of cutting off, Steve.
I'm cutting out now and then.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Jenny's creating a loop or something because it looks like she's talking in the middle, and that's what's causing the disturbance.
Yeah, I think there's just some disturbance from her end with her mic that interrupts Steve.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just mute yourself, please.
Yeah, Jenny, would you mind muting your?
That's fine.
Thank you. See if that goes away. You're right, because I was hearing a weird noise in the background too.
Thank you.
All right. So, any questions on this or the other 3 consent items? We had as Kevin said, we had a leak in one of the pipes, and we're looking into whether we're going to be seeing more. Our pipes are have got 20, 30 years on them now. So we shall see. Check register. Interestingly enough, one of the checks that came through in this month's register report that isn't even shown, I had to do some work on because we weren't able to find out what the check number was because they could barely read it. So I found that Wells Fargo has a really good tool online, and our board member, who's a Newper, knows that I was blown away that you could actually still see the checks online. But I'll get to that more because I do want to briefly touch on 4A and 4D, but not much, as Kevin said. All right. Well, then we could do a roll call approve the consent items. Are there any other questions about them? No, I see shaking heads. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we have to approve consent items, right, Kevin? Double checking. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so you can poll us. I vote yes.
Director Bajaj,
Yes.
Director Chow,
Yes.
Director Racy,
Yes.
Director Sethi.
Yes.
All right, so unanimous. All right, so as Kevin found out, we were trying to do some new board policies, and basically around signing authority to try and solve signing problems. To the fact that currently 2 of our board members are out of state, I believe, and one can't sign at all because she works for Newper works for Wells Fargo. So it's down to Kevin and me as signatories. Kevin, our board member Kevin. Sorry, I don't want to confuse the 2 Kevins. Kevin Chang. And so legal got back to us and said it's a lot more complicated than you think. So we didn't. So we're putting this off to a future time after we can work with legal to come up with some way of hopefully come up with some way to add the general manager. This would be item D as a listed key executive for the bank account, but maybe without signatory policies. I don't want to go into a lot of detail on this stuff because, as legal has said, they're working on it, and they want to make sure we preserve our oversight, capabilities as a board. So it's a problem the problems we're facing are the fact that we're such a small organization that separation of functions, the primary functions of financial or of checks are one person, ideally one person makes out the checks, another person approves them, and a third person signs them. And that's what we've been doing historically. And but that becomes a more of a problem because anyway. And I guess the longer I spend on this, the more confused I'll make everybody else. So let's see what we come up with. And instead, we could be buried on this for a long time. And I'm just trying to make sure that we have continuity and a way to conduct a fiscal business, under the new rules. I hope that Kevin may be right, that we may be able to continue to meet remotely. But when we get to item, well, I'll go to item B, 4B, discuss and approve the method for evaluating the general manager's performance. That's what we'll be on now. So Kevin and I have been working on trying to come up with a procedure. And according to the way you read this, the following general procedure is proposed. It would mean that we'd have to actually meet in person maybe next month with a lawyer to unseal our reviews. Kevin, Kevin and I looked at 3 different formats for evaluation input, and we decided on this one that you got as part of your handouts, the proposed survey instrument. It's a starting point. We could change it if we want. I assume everybody's had some time since yesterday to look through it. Its strong points are it's very simple, and it also allows for comments. It focuses on the kinds of performance evaluation criteria that you should be looking at for a general manager. But given your history as board members, you may find that a lot of these questions or items you go, hey, I don't have enough data to decide, is Kevin doing a above average job or a below average job? So we had to have a ability to put down doesn't apply or insufficient data. In the past, when we've reviewed the general manager, one board member has collected together all the inputs and merged them as a into a single document, and that's been the basis for evaluating. But we can't. We need to do that during a personnel session. So if we can't meet, if we're not meeting next month, that may put off this review for another month. We'll see. Because Kevin, you were saying, Kevin Davis, you were saying that there's a possibility that we might not have to meet in person next month.
That's what some other folks think, but I won't believe it till I see it. If it does get pushed out where we don't need to meet in person, we can still do a closed session. So there's no need to meet in person for this. It's totally fine to do online. We just cut that part of the recording out.
True. Anyway, I'm sure since you've done the most of the work in terms of coming up with this, you have more to add, Kevin?
Yeah, so the general procedure would be that we would look at the survey instrument. The board would take a look and say, yes, I like the way this form is set up, or no, I don't. I want to make these changes or whatnot. Once the survey instrument is approved, then each director will rate the general manager independently without talking to anyone. And of course, this is private because it's a personnel evaluation. Those evaluations could be unsealed at the closed session, whether that's remote or in person. Either is totally fine. We could potentially even send them to the county council so that he can open and read them for us. And then once we're in closed session, again, this is where the public would not be participating because of personnel privacy reasons. And then, of course, the board could deliberate about the different evaluations, come to kind of a consensus, discuss that consensus with the general manager, and then, of course, appoint a director to kind of compile that for a record, which would go into the personnel file at a later date. It doesn't have to be at that meeting. And then once all of that's decided and voted on, then of course we exit closed session and then report out that the evaluation had been completed and whatever votes had been complete, who voted for what, and then so on and so forth. Are there any questions on that? Does that sound reasonable?
So the reporting has to be on the same day, or is it done at some other time?
You mean number 6? Or you mean the reporting out? That's same day.
Reporting out.
That's same day, yeah. So whenever you do a closed session, what's going to happen is you kind of exit open session, which is what we're in now. We're in open session. And then we enter closed session, so none of the public's allowed in. You're allowed to deliberate on very specific items, but nothing else. And then you take a vote or no vote, and then whatever happened there, any action that's taken has to be reported out, and you have to go back into open session. So you can't go from open session, closed session, and then end the meeting. You actually have to go back into open session, say, hey, this is what happened, and then you can close.
Got it.
Yeah? Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
So how does the sealing and unsealing process work virtually? What would that look like? What should we expect?
Right, so that one might be a little bit more tricky, but what we could do is use a simple screen share. So just throw it right up there, and then that way all the directors can see it at the same time. We could also maybe discuss again with county council, if they have all of ours, then maybe they could securely send them. So I don't know. I think that's something we'd have to work with council on, just because again, a lot of times with evaluations, you don't want them to be floating on the internet just for privacy reasons. But yeah, I think probably it would just go on the screen and we'd go through each of, or either you guys would go through it if I'm not in the meeting, and then when I do come in and I can see some of them, I don't know, it doesn't matter. One of those two, you guys get to decide how you want to do the evaluations. Does that answer the question? screen share?
It would be easier if we're meeting together in person, but
It is.
that's not
Yeah.
going to happen.
It's much easier in person.
Yeah. But that's a pipe dream. I can see now at least 2 members can't be there in person next month, or at least one.
Yeah. So the actual evaluation form, it's very simplified. The original one had 1 through 5, but you know, from the employee perspective, I just want to know what I need to do, right? And functionally, the difference between a 1 and a 2, all of it means change is needed. And the difference between a 4 and a 5 out of 5, it all means things are fine, right? So this basically tells the employee, what do you need to change? What are you good on? And what is okay? And then of course, there's the no rating, which is, you know, if you don't have any experience, if you haven't heard or seen anything, you could just put NR, it's no problem. There's an overall rating section, as well as individual, if you wanted to use those to make any kind of decision. And then any comments you might have. So maybe there's like one section you could say, oh, I saw something here, or, you know, I really appreciate that, or I didn't like that. You could say number 7 and then elaborate on it if you want. Or you can put an overall rating, either way. And there's different sections. One is relationship with the board. This one, I'm sure you'll have a lot about management skills and abilities, services to people served, fiscal management, and personal and professional attributes, community and public relations, and effective leadership of staff. So those are the general categories. And again, just a starting point.
If we're going to use it, you're right, it's a starting point. I mean, the question I have is, is whether we need to agree we're going to each of us fill one of these out before the next meeting.
Yeah, ideally, the board would agree to use the survey instrument and the procedure.
Right, right. This is, I mean, so far in my experience of this board, we haven't disagreed on much, so it's kind of hard to pick this thing apart. You know, it's a starting point. You try and use it as you can see it's designed, I would say, but I think we need to rate Kevin in theory, so that in theory next month we can have a closed session and see if we're in agreement about his overall performance ratings. If there are any comments, like I said, in the past we had a board member put together all the after we agreed on them, put together the assemble all the comments together and into a single document, and that's what we used for an evaluation. Does that work for everybody? I guess is my question.
Yep.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, because we each have a unique perspective on Kevin Davis, and depending on how much interaction we have with him, it's easier or harder to fill out any of these questions. You know, our experiences are all different. So, all right. Any other questions? Sounds like we're in agreement. We can use this as a instrument for doing our first cut at our individual cuts at evaluations. Normally, we also would get some feedback from coworkers too, and I'm not sure how well that's going to work out. Kevin and I talked about that a little bit, you know. It's hard, you know. This whole thing with the Brown Act of doing an evaluation is tough, you know, because the only time we can get together legally is when we're in a meeting, you know, and for personnel matters in a closed session. And as I think it was Nooper who asked, normally closed session, when we go into closed session, we if we agree upon if we take any action in closed session, we report it when we come out in open session. So I'm hoping that if we go into closed session at the next meeting to combine all of our evaluations together into one, that we can come out and say, yeah, we've got that. And it may take another month, I'm thinking, to have it combined and approved at another closed session the month afterwards, which would be November. Is that the way you were seeing it, Kevin Davis, too? That it might take two monthly closed sessions? That's the way I was picturing it.
It may take two.
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe we can get them all done with a closed session next month. So, all right. So I don't think we need a formal approval of this method to take a vote on it. Does anybody disagree with that? I think we'll just go with it. You know, the outline of how to take it, and we'll see how it merges in the next month's meeting. You know.
Does everyone have a printer, or should I print and mail these? Because I can PDF email them, but if anyone needs me to print and mail, I can do that as well.
Do you want to just send it out as a Word document? That way we can all fill it out.
Yeah, I can do that as Word. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, Word work. PDF, Word. Anyway, okay. All right. Well, then we'll do our ratings, and next month try to figure out how to merge them together. That's going to be a challenge, I think. But
I'm happy to merge it. I can do that.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Yeah. Yeah, that might be better in some ways. All right. So our next item is approve the creation of the Ad Hoc Subcommittee. Well, we really did set up the subcommittee. I brought this up as an action item because I said, what's going on with this? Nooper and Kevin Chow had agreed to go off and try and come up with some kind of guideline for this. They were be the ad hoc subcommittee to look at whatever we come up with. But now it's been, I think Kevin Davis has kind of gotten complicated by the fact that we know now that the financial oversight thing is all kind of tied up with legal.
It's okay. I mean, we can get started on this because there was quite a few reports that the board receives that we could look at how they're received, what they look like, whether more information is needed, that type of stuff. Also, the oversight committee could even look at some of those policies and dig into it a little bit before they get to the board as well. So I think it doesn't hurt to start early on that.
Right. So I guess my problem is I read this and I'm not sure it's enough to, whether it's too much direction or too little direction. I think it's more too little directions. Non-specific enough, but maybe not. You know, when I looked at it before and read these recommended questions, I go, yeah, those are the kinds of questions to look at. But I think I envision this as being looked at in light of we were going to come up with some policies. We were going to come up with some changed policies and procedures for handling checks and other financial information. But primarily, in my mind, the checking account was a starting point. And I wanted to make sure that two other people took their eyes at it, besides just you and besides Kevin Davis and myself, to make sure that what we come up with makes sense in terms of financial correctness. I can't think of the word for it, but anyway, make sure that it safeguards public monies, basically, you know. And the procedure we've been using for many years now of one person, Sunny, fills out the checks, Kevin approves the bills, and I or somebody else on the board signs the check. And at each one of those stages, we review and make sure all the information is there to justify an expenditure, for instance. That's worked, but that may have to change. So I was looking at this committee as a way to review those and make sure that there's nothing we're missing. Now, am I seeing that wrong, Kevin Davis?
The questions here don't actually look at the policy. So this is more about the actual, whether the type and the amount of information that we're giving is the right kind to be able to adequately have an idea of the financial sort of well-being of the district. What you're talking about is also important, and that would be kind of the policy review of the proposed policy. That's not in here. It could be added, or it could be a separate ad hoc committee. There's multiple ways of doing it. But all of those policies will be reviewed by the full board, of course, when they're ready.
Okay, I see what you're saying. This was your concept here was this was making sure that the public information that's available to all of us publicly and the rest of the public is adequate to give a good picture of where we're standing financially.
Yes, and also to potentially detect any kind of suspicious activity, or at least address it, right? Hey, this looks weird. Why is that? And then, of course, making sure there's an avenue to get that answered. Yeah.
And under existing procedures, there always has been, from my experience. Out of the 50 checks I signed this month, and other documents I reviewed and initialed, there was only one or two. One I had a question on. So that's about right. One per month. I go, what is this? Oh, okay. Now I understand what it is. All right. So that's pretty low incidence. So do we need to take any action on this ad hoc subcommittee to create it? I mean, like I said, I thought we had done that before, but maybe I'm mistaken, Kevin Davis.
The ad hoc, that was just a suggestion, as it was part of a staff memo, so it never actually was agendized.
Okay.
And now that it's on the agenda, of course, the board could call this ad hoc committee.
All right. Well, what do other people think about, do we need this? Hello?
I mean, I don't think it hurts. I mean, as far as I can tell, like the information that's being provided right now is enough and plenty in order for us to conduct proper financial oversight. But I do think maybe I think definitely trying to look at ways we could improve it doesn't hurt, and I think that could definitely be a good way to spend some time. And I like that, you were talking a little bit about this being maybe too little direction. I think this is sort of helpful in that sense, because it lets the committee themselves decide, okay, how much do we really want to explore this further, and how much time should we be spending on this? And I think even maybe that committee could, I don't know if there's a proper way to do this, but getting the inputs of the board itself on, what complaints we might have, if any, on the financial information, and then being able to take those inputs and make something out of it in terms of modifications for the future. So I'm definitely in favor of it, but I don't think it's super necessary at this time if we think we should be spending our time somewhere else or focusing on other things.
All right. Anybody else? So you don't see Nicole, you don't see a need to spend a lot of time on it right now.
Yeah, I would say there's really not a dire need for us to look into this. At least that's the perspective that I'm coming in with, but other people might disagree.
I mean, I personally think it might be better to establish this now and look into these factors now before we have a reason we need to look into something like this, if that makes sense. Yeah, like, I think it's better to err on the side of precaution here. And I don't doubt that any of us are willing to put in, you know, a few extra hours each week to do this. So, I mean, I think it can really only help us. So I'm in favor of going for it.
All right. Kevin or Nooper, you have anything to say?
I would agree with Misha. It's better to kind of get a head start before we end up in a situation where it's needed.
Okay.
What was the genesis of this? Like how did this come about? Was it just kind of something that was on the back plate, or was there something that happened? Like, how did we come into this to talking about the ad hoc subcommittee?
Right. I think it's because we're looking at changing some of the financial management of the district, specifically the key executives and some of the policies around signing checks.
Mhm.
And those are some of the items that were pulled this meeting. We're basically kind of taking a different approach to that, one which will be arguably better than what we had in mind before. But because there's these big financial changes, that should also come with increased oversight anytime you're making big changes to the financial management. And so the genesis of this ad hoc committee is, hey, we're making big changes. Let's take a close look.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think it's good to have done, but I don't see, like, I kind of agree with Nicole in the sense that, you know, if there's nothing major that happened, I mean, you know, it'd be nice to do, but I think if I guess we feel that we need to be taking care of this and it makes sense right now, then we might as well do it. But if there's no specific reason that we need to do it, I'm okay with just kind of making do with what we have as well. But if there is, you know, a big change coming with the way we're doing, like maybe we're modernizing the payment system and stuff like that, then it would make sense to take a look at it.
Hmm. It's all right. So we're kind of split as to whether we need this committee right now, is what I'm hearing from the other four of you. As two of you think we may need to start doing this sooner than later, and two of you seem to be saying it's a good idea, but I don't see needing it to happen right now.
Yeah, I mean, given now, you know, that I've heard a little bit from everyone, like, I think I'd be in favor of just approving this as is and trying to find two people who can really work on this, because again, if there's a concern for it, we don't want to delay it. And I completely agree with that philosophy. I sort of just said that, you know, from the reports that we've been getting every month before our meetings, like, that's enough for me, for my confidence. But if people have doubts, even just a little bit, I think it's really important we get it done now as opposed to later on, and then, you know, worry about it when something happens.
All right. All right. Trying to think about where to go from here. I'm kind of at a loss.
Maybe think about it some more, decide next month.
Well, we can do that, you know, and review it next month. I mean, like I said, in this line a couple of months ago, we picked two people to take a look at things and see if our new systems would checking systems had any inherent problems in them. But this is larger than just that, is what Kevin Davis and you guys are all saying. Is our public reporting sufficient? And I have to agree with the rest of you that when you look at all the reports together that I see, a pretty clear picture emerges as to how we're doing financially and where the money's going. You know, so it's, at least under the existing current system of doing these things, we haven't had a problem, any significant problem over years. So the current checks and balances are working, but we'll until we change, and the current reports are working, because you guys are seeing what's going on based on the current reports. So we could, like you say, put it off for another month and see if we need to do this. What do you think of that, Kevin Davis?
That sounds reasonable. It also could be modified to look at the new policies once they're ready too. So there's more options to it, and it doesn't have to happen now. You could even do this after when the policies are, as they're being implemented. There's a lot of different methods.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, and it sounds like we don't really need to take any specific action on that. D was, like I say, pulled out because it turned out to be more complicated legally than we thought. Kevin, can we say anything about A or D to bring up?
Yeah, it's on the agenda. We can talk about it. The original resolution was just going to add me on as a key executive, but then in discussion with legal counsel, I think it might be better to do something a little bit less broad and a lot more specific, right? So just saying, hey, the general manager is now a key executive and can do all these things. You could instead write a resolution that limits that a lot more, right? So having, instead of a really broad authority, we're looking at a slightly more complicated kind of carve outs of that authority, which I prefer actually. And same thing with items 4A and 4B, is instead of giving broad authority, it'll be just a lot more specific as to where that authority is.
So when you say specific, is it like functions of the types of checks you're writing, or is it dollar figure? Okay, got it.
Yes, you nailed it. So the big one really is refund checks, right? So Steve kind of, he talked about how there's all these refunds because we take deposits for all of our swim camp, and we're not doing rentals right now, but we did take deposits for those, and those all have to be returned. And so what happens is, especially in the summer, whoever is doing check signing is going to get a nice thick stack of essentially these just really, kind of normal refunds. And so I think instead of just saying, hey, you know what, general manager can sign any check under this amount, it's going to be general manager can sign refund checks specifically. And then that takes a big chunk of really well-documented transactions off the table. It'll still be in the, all the reports and everything, but, board members won't need to, sign these, deposit checks.
Got it. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. And actually, of the 51 checks that are on the report, a few pages back, less than half of them were refund checks, or let's say 20. That would be a good round number without going back and counting them again. So, it sounds like legal is also saying that we need to be careful amounts and types that of expenditures that he can sign. For instance, fixing this leak in the water pipe that was in the manager's report, that's going to be about $1,000, to fix that. Well, that's an emergency thing, and that's within the procedural guidelines that we already have in our procedures, that he has the authority to go beyond that. So he can take care of emergencies, most emergencies. I think part of what legal was saying, if I remember what Kevin passed on to me, it was that entering into contracts, which is a little more slippery slope, in terms of control. There's just a whole bunch of different financial constraints. Practically speaking, with the way Wells Fargo is set up, for instance, if the general manager becomes a key executive for the Wells Fargo bank account without general signatory powers, that could work in a certain way too. So they're looking at all these issues from a legal point of view and what makes sense. So you have any more to add, Kevin Davis?
No, I think, I guess the the only thing I would say is just that these policies will come back and they'll be much more specific, less broad, and I think better.
Right. This all comes up because I keep being concerned what's going to happen when I leave the board, and I can't sign anymore legally. So we'll get them hashed out. It's anything to do with banks seems to take a lot longer than it used to. And I'm sure Newper, working for the bank, knows what I mean. Nothing's simple,
Nothing is simple. Wells Fargo is trying to simplify, I can tell you that.
Yeah. So if you were, what was that you said? I didn't hear you.
So Wells Fargo has been trying to simplify its processes, but it's still got a long way to go.
Yeah. So, anyway, life's gotten more complicated. Let's put it that way. So, all right. Anything else people have questions on? No. Well, I really wanted to get into the financial stuff more this evening, but we really can't unless we have policies to work on. So meanwhile, we'll do our general manager's performance as our action item for all of us. And we'll get back to looking at this ad hoc subcommittee when we got something specifically more detailed that we need them to do, I think. That's the feeling I get from everybody. Anything else? It's the only time we get to meet every month. So even if it's slightly off the agenda, I feel like letting it go. Or trying to see if we can discuss it under one of our items. All right. Sounds like nobody has any more issues for this month. I hope everybody's voting and getting everybody else to vote. All right. Well, then I guess I'll move to adjourn at 7:14. Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
All right. And thank you all for being here this month. I hope it can happen again, next month. And it may happen in person, for some of us. So Misha, are you within the state of California or not?
Unfortunately, no.
All right. So two of us are out of state. So, okay. I wanted to double check on that because I thought you were. And we know that he's in, Nakul is in Michigan. So anyway, all right. Well, we'll get together next month. Thank you all for getting together. Like I said, I don't want to unnecessarily prolong a meeting and get nothing done. I just wish we had a few more action items that hadn't been canceled. Thank you all, and
Thank you.
stay safe and stay healthy.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.